izinkomo zobaba. Ilanga selishonile bafana masiku izinkomo zobaba. Ilanga lishonile bafana masiku izinkomo zobaba. Sengibathenga ibheka ngasematekeni angiboni lutho. Sengibathenga ibheka ngasematekeni angiboni lutho. Sengibathenga ibheka ngasematekeni angiboni lutho. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Bafana zipina izinkomo zobaba. Bafana zipina izinkomo zobaba. Bafana zipina izinkomo zobaba. Bafana zipina izinkomo zobaba. Webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, siyobheka izinkomo zobaba esigangeni. Webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, siyobheka izinkomo zobaba esigangeni. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemuka nomoya. Ilanga lishonile bafana masiku izinkomo zobaba. 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 Webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, siyobheka izinkomo zobaba esigangeni. Webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, webafana thathani izinduku, siyobheka izinkomo zobaba esigangeni. Wasiyona bola ngani na wasiyeki inkomo zobaba zemunga no moya.
Warmest greetings, sisters and brothers, and welcome to the Pan-African People's Phone-In. The Pan-African People's Phone-In is a space for themed interactive discussion conducted over the internet. We look particularly at themes and subjects that are relevant to the African community globally. Sometimes we will have guests, but the general pattern has been for us to work through literature in work study style. So working through Pan-Africanist literature in work study style. The line remains open during the program to allow people to ring in and interact should you choose to. But in a sense, it's a bit like an on-air lesson in Pan-Africanism, broken down into segments over a number of weeks. But remember, the line is open if you do decide that you want to ring in and interact. We ask you to please let all of your family and friends know about the program. Tell your fellow organization members. Tell your colleagues, tell associates, and tell other networks that you're connected with about the program. Let them know that the program is happening every Monday from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. and that's going by the time as it is in Britain. The summer time clock will soon change over here in Britain, so that will adjust timings for people in other parts of the world who don't have to go through the clock changing routine. So let me start by wishing a warm good evening to all of the people that take time to listen and connect with this program. Some people connect with it live. Some people connect with it, via internet, YouTube and those kinds of things, and watch in their own time. Let me just say a warm good evening to all of the people who make that effort and connect with the program. I want to say a warm good evening to our engineers. They are behind the scenes doing the work that is necessary to ensure that technically we can make the broadcast. So thank you so much to our engineers. I want to say a warm good evening to the station's management. The station's management, are really doing some excellent work in the background, just organising this infrastructure. And of course, I want to say a warm good evening to my fellow presenters here on Bless Radio. A warm good evening to all of you here on Bless Radio. Now the number, I'll give out the number for interaction. The number for interaction is 079 444 313 66. Incidentally, because I know that I've had some communications from people who are listening internationally. The number, if you're dialing it internationally, is +44 79 444 313 66. That's if you're ringing in internationally. What happens is you add 44, which is the code for England, and then you drop the 0 that comes at the beginning that people in this country use, that people in England use, and then you dial the rest of the number, and that brings you through. And incidentally, let me just say this, that number is a WhatsApp number as well as a phone number, or as well as a mobile number. So it means that you're actually able to ring in and interact via WhatsApp if you decide that you want to do so. So when I'm giving you this number, if you're not in England, but you want to interact, if you have access to WhatsApp, the number that I'm reading out as the number for you to interact on, that number, you should just program it straight into your phone, because that number, if you dial it on WhatsApp, will bring you straight in to the studio, as well as the ordinary use of that phone number. So let me repeat that number in the hope that people have had an opportunity to grab pens and paper, or get their phone into gear for them to put the number somehow in the memory of the phone, or whatever means that you use. Let me give out the number again. If you're dialing from England, the number is 09. Sorry, let's start again. If you're dialing from England, the number is 079 444 313 66. If you're dialing from outside of Britain, the number is plus 44. And so that plus, by the way, is whatever it takes for you to dial out of the country that you're in. So it's plus 44 79 444 313 66. Now, let me see. I think what I'll do at this stage is just go straight into the libation corner. Let's just go straight into the libation corner. So this is the libation corner. This is the section of the program where we honor our ancestors and the historical liberation achievements of our ancestors. Now, you can contribute to the libation corner in one of three ways. Firstly, if you have a loved one that has recently passed, we ask you to ring in and have that loved one acknowledged right here in the libation corner. And secondly, if it is the anniversary of the passing of a loved one, then once again we invite you to ring in and have that loved one acknowledged here in the libation corner. And thirdly, if there is an African historical anniversary that all of us should be remembering at this time, then once again the line is open for you to ring in and have that African historical anniversary acknowledged during the libation corner. Now, what I do is I share some libations. And all that happens is that whilst I'm sharing libations, if you decide that you want to ring in, if you want to share a libation, you don't wait for me to stop. You can just ring in and actually make your contribution, and all that will happen is that I will stop, allow you to make your contribution, and then when you've completed, then I will resume the libations that I'm making. So I'll just remind you of the number again. It's 079 444 313 pt16. And I'm going to open by sharing a libation. And that first libation goes out to a brother I know by the same name of Sam. He's actually Sam Glean is his name. And he's an elder who crossed to meet the ancestors. I believe he passed this morning, this very morning. He was a member of Caribbean Labour Solidarity, which is an organisation in our community with quite a few elders in it, actually. It was founded by a very, very powerful political comrade by the name of Richard Hart. Richard Hart, who crossed to meet the ancestors himself, I think 3, maybe 4 years ago now. One of the other members has passed, and his name is Sam Glean. We send our condolences, of course, to Sam's family. We also send a libation out to Brother Kamal, or Kamal. Brother Kamal was one of the leaders in the Grenada Revolution. It's very significant at this time, actually. He's one of the leaders of the Grenada Revolution. He was one of those that was actually sent to prison for 26 years. Wrongly sent to prison for the murder of Maurice Bishop and other, and other people. Evidence now shows that it was not murder. It was a terrible thing, but it was not cold-blooded murder in the way that many of us perhaps thought at the time. Well, Brother Kamal crossed to meet the ancestors. Let me see. It was actually in January that he passed, but there is going to be a commemoration for him next Monday, which I will be attending. So I'm remembering Brother Kamal at this time. As we continue with the libations, remembering, of course, and I haven't even dated today, but today is the 9th of March 2020. And the libation that we'll share here will go back to the 10th of March, and this time we go back to the year 1947. And one of our ancestors by the name of D.N. Roster, he patented a 2-cycle gas engine. So, we were at the forefront of technological development, because if you imagine that in 1947 creating an engine, this would have been one of the earlier prototypes of engines, and so right in amongst the mix there of inventions around, transport, you had one of our ancestors, D.N. Roster, who patented the 2-cycle gas engine. Going back to the 12th of December, 12th of March, we also remember Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker is an African who is said to have been involved in the founding of what I call US Satan. And Benjamin Banneker commissioned a plan to develop what today is called Washington, D.C. So it was an African who was responsible for creating the capital city, or for setting out the layout of the capital city of US Satan. We shouldn't be so surprised by that, because it was African people who built US Satan. We built it free of charge, in a sense, in that we were not paid. Our ancestors were enslaved, gave their blood to build that country into the technologically advanced nation that it is now. It owes everything it has to us. Moving on now to the 13th. The 13th of March, and we go back to the year 1899. Because on the 13th of March 1899, one of our ancestors by the name of J.H. Robinson, he patented the life-saving guards life-saving guards for locomotives. So if you can imagine, in those days, what you had were train engines which didn't operate by petrol. They operated by coal. They operated by wood. It was a furnace. They created fire, and they used that fire to create steam to drive the trains forward. And one of our ancestors created the guard, in other words, that piece that you put over the front to ensure that people didn't fall in it and become fuel for the train. A very, very important invention, and it would make sense that an African would think of that, because it was our lives that were in danger. We were doing that heavy labour work, that dangerous work, and so all the time we would have been looking to protect our lives, to keep ourselves in a fit state to, as far as possible in the circumstances, enjoy the life given to us. And moving on to the final contribution that I'll make to the Libation Corner this week. It's again, I did mention it just at the front, but let's just remind everyone again that the Grenada Revolution occurred, or the commencement of it occurred on the 13th of March. That was the 13th of March 1979. So what's that? 1979, that's 41 years ago. So 41 years ago, the Grenada Revolution ignited. Out of the Grenada Revolution came one of our greatest leaders in the Caribbean, Maurice Bishop. Yes, Maurice Bishop was one of the people, one of those greats that came out of the Caribbean and came literally out of the Grenada Revolution. Now we will be, as I mentioned, we will be commemorating the Grenada Revolution, let me see, next week Monday. So next week Monday I will not be broadcasting in this form. We may, if we are able to do so, do an outside broadcast where we will be broadcasting live from a conference which has been held in honor of the Grenada Revolution. Now, the Grenada Revolution lasted until October of 1983, and sadly, despite all the great achievements of that, it ended in the most tragic way in 1983. But what we will do, I think, is we will listen to the words, before we even start today's program, we'll listen to the words of the great Maurice Bishop. If you just bear with me just one moment. It seems as though there may be a little bit of a mix-up here. And I was going to share the words of Maurice Bishop But it appears that may not be the case. Okay, but let me just play this tune for you. If you just bear with me.
I'm on the beat with capitalists, not repatriate.
Okay, so we're having a few technicalities here. So what I will do is I won't continue with that. There seem to be some technical issues going on with that particular CD. What we will do is we will begin to move into the program properly. So let me just let me just remind people of where we are. So what have we been doing? For the past 2 months or so, we have been working from this book that I have in my possession, Pan-Africanism from Program to Philosophy, sub-entitled An Outlook on Liberation. And we've been working with that book, and we've been working with the first section of that book, the first 4 chapters of that book, which in effect marks the first section of that book. And what we've done is we've looked at strategy. We've tried to identify and outline strategies of Pan-Africanism. In chapter 1, we looked at a generic type of strategy for Pan-Africanism. In chapter 2, we looked at the strategy of Marcus Garvey, the foundation of Pan-Africanist, modern Pan-Africanist strategy. In chapter 3, we looked at the strategy of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. The Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, who took Marcus Garvey's strategy to even higher heights. So we looked at him. And then in the 4th chapter, we looked at Malcolm X. And we tried to make a connection between these great Pan-Africanists, or the strategies of the great Pan-Africanists. And we could see that the template was laid by Marcus Garvey. We could see that, the modern development of Marcus Garvey's strategy came in 2 parts. One which focused on the motherland, and Kwame Nkrumah, of course, was the head of the leader of the Pan-Africanist world at that point in time. So it was natural that he would be coordinating the overall plan. But within that overall plan, there was a section for the diaspora. And the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah's good friend, Malcolm X, was given the responsibility of coordinating the diaspora part of the plan. And so we looked at those and we made some connections between those. Incidentally, Malcolm X was assassinated. And you'll notice that what happened to that part of the plan is it was taken up as far as it was possible by the Black Panthers. So the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, it didn't have the full understanding that Malcolm X had, although it took Malcolm X's plans even further. It became the diaspora wing, if you like, and you got Black Panther, Black Panther or Black Power movements springing up all over the African diaspora, and in some cases even in Africa, you had some Black Power movements. But the Black Power movement was the development of Malcolm X's section of the African liberation strategy, and many people were operating within that framework without realizing that they were operating within that framework. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at strategy. Now we're going to move to the ideas behind strategy, ideas that form strategy. There are economic ideas which inform strategy. There are political ideas that inform strategy. There are ideological ideas that inform strategy. And there are philosophical ideas that inform strategy. So for the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at political economy. So we're going to be looking particularly at the political and economic ideas that inform Pan-Africanist strategies. And in today's program in particular, we are going to be looking at the position of African people within the global capitalist system. You'll hear the word capitalism used, you'll hear the word imperialism used. They can in effect be used interchangeably. So within that system, where do we fit in? And so today we'll begin the process of examining where we sit within that global system, which is not necessarily our friend. In fact, certainly not our friend. Beyond that, in the future, as we move forward, just to give you some idea of which direction we're going in, we will then look at the process of revolution. And we'll just spend a bit of time looking at revolution and what revolution actually means. And it's important to look at revolution because we're looking now at capitalism. And if you have a revolution in a capitalist situation, it brings you into socialism. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the African position of African people in capitalism at the moment. We're going to look at the process for getting out of the trap that capitalism has set for us. And then we're going to look at where you get to when you get out of the capitalist prison that has been, that has been, if you like, prepared for us. And so those three sections will be looking at the political economy of the world and changing the political economy of the world to create a better circumstance for African people. And then there will be two remaining sections of the book after that. And those two remaining sections will look firstly at the ideological ideas, the principles underlying the political economy. So the political economy doesn't just stand in isolation. It's the nuts and bolts, but there are even higher ideas informing the political economy, and those are ideological ideas. And those ideological ideas give us our principles that set the standards by which we live by, the standards by which we engage with other people. And so we'll be looking at that after we've looked at the three sections on political economy. And then we will come to the final chapter of the book. And the final chapter of the book will look at the highest level of thinking. And the highest level of thinking is the philosophical level. It's the level at which we try to understand what is the cause of the universe. What brought all of this into being? And then we try to apply that understanding to the nuts and bolts of living everyday life in order to improve those nuts and bolts, in order to make life better. And so the last chapter will be to look at the philosophical ideas that inform Pan-Africanism. So, where are we? We're not quite halfway through the book at the moment, but we're somewhere in that region. We've looked at the strategies, and that's taken us almost halfway through the book. Not quite, but almost halfway through the book. And now we're going to move on to political economy. So just a reminder, the book is Pan-Africanism from Program to Philosophy, an Outlook on Liberation. That's the book, that's the title of the book. And of course, I always like to give an overview of the book before we go into the fullness of the study. And so the overview of the book is at the back of the book, and I'll share this with you now. It reads, Pan-Africanism from Program to Philosophy is the only book in the world to provide clear, lucid and simple explanations of the liberation strategies of Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah and Malcolm X. Historians have been naturally concerned with reporting facts of the lives of these great Pan-Africanists, but it is for activists to contextualize them in liberation strategies and action plans, a process kick-started in it. In addition, 1. It provides clear, succinct explanation of international capitalism's parasitical dependence upon African people. We'll begin to look at that today. 2. It provides a clear, simple explanation of scientific socialism, relating it to African people, to African principles and culture. 3. It introduces the notion of a greater cycle of revolution which examines and locates revolution not as an incident, but as a process in the context of the entirety of human history. 4. Through an examination of universal principles, it locates the material base of the two opposing sets of ideologies driving human activity and identifies the natural position of African culture in that milieu. And finally, 5. Through a newly devised set of dialectical tools, it provides a powerfully clear philosophical analysis of matter as a basis for uncovering and understanding the universal laws required for African liberation. Pan-Africanism from Program to Philosophy is a long overdue and much needed source book on the theory of Pan-Africanism. For people new to Pan-Africanist activism, or those who simply want to understand what Pan-Africanism is, this book provides clear theoretical guidance. For seasoned cadres and veterans of the Pan-Africanist movement, it is a checkpoint, a frame of reference for assessing, orientating, or even refocusing the trajectory of their activities. Ideally, it should be studied collectively in groups, particularly those genuinely working towards the liberation of Africa and her people in the context of worldwide revolution. So we're at chapter 5 now, and chapter 5 is entitled International Class Analysis and African Leadership in the Global Revolution. In fact, what I will do, I'll do something different here. Let me, before going into the book itself, let's listen to a tune from Maccabi. If you just bear with me.
Institutionally, physically, mentally, hey. Still a go on all over, it's still a go on. Racism exists in a many forms. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism, yo. Still a go on all over, it's still a go on. Racism exists in a many forms. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism. Hey, it's institutional, it's in the institution. Talking it straight so there is no confusion. We still have face this racist pollution. Seems like it's written in the Constitution. Many people face discrimination. Barriers put up in many organizations. Years of hard work, me say years of devotion. And you never once get promotion. No, still a go on all over, it's still a go on. Racism exists in a many forms. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism, Hey, me say the police in England, them have to admit that X amount of racists, they in it. Murder, commit and racist. Get a quick look on Stephen. How then could I get away with it? Also existing at the health service. When it comes to black mental health, they are taking the to put a pump us up with drugs, man, at this, them at this. And you might get suffocated anyhow. You're racist investigating the judges. Hear what them fight. If a black man and a white man commit the same crime, the black man's more likely to be doing some time, while the white man might get a fine. Still a go on and over, still a go on. Racism exists in a many form. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism, yo. Still a go on and over, it's still a go on. Racism exists in a many form. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism. Yo, a lot of TV presenters, but not program makers. No leading characters for the British black actors. In the army, in the navy, in the music as well. When a white man sound black, them always sell. We're definitely not stupid and we're surely not fools. Everybody knows something not right in the schools. I'm not saying every black youth abides by the rules, but we use are being used like tools. The amount of black youth being expelled is really excessive. Always the excuse they were being aggressive, just for being themselves, just for being expressive. This system is just too aggressive, Lord. Still a go on and over, it's still a go on. Racism exists in a many form. Still a go on England, it's still a go on. Racism, hey. You want to see we in the European airport. You want to see them face when them see we passport. Them put it on the light, them check the number them too. And the people in front of we them gone straight through. Inna the court, it inna the sport. It in a football, no black players, but not a lot of coaches at all. On the pitch, the black players have to really stand tall.
So that was Racism by Maccabee. Maccabee, one of the champion artists. I think he actually operates out of Birmingham in central England. Racism by Maccabee. And racism is relevant to the discussion that we're having now as we look at the position of African people in the world capitalist system, which oozes racism. But what we are going to do is we're going to do a class analysis of that capitalist system. And oddly enough, well, I say oddly enough, it shouldn't really be a surprise, what the class analysis ends up doing is it ends up proving the racism inherent in the capitalist system. So Chapter 5, International Class Analysis and African Leadership in the Global Revolution. 5.1 is entitled Eurocentric Misconceptions about Class. And 5.11, the additional subheading, is an incorrect assumption. And it reads as follows. Karl Marx advanced the argument that revolution requires a highly developed proletariat, that is, a highly skilled and well-organized working class. This analysis suggests that revolutions can only happen in advanced capitalist societies such as those found in Europe. It also implies that Europe's industrial nations provide the front line of revolutionary activity. This then means that the European working classes must be at the forefront of worldwide revolutionary processes. It follows from this line of reasoning that all other exploited groups need to get behind working classes in order to help them to overcome the capitalist exploiters. This is necessary because all other exploited groups in the world benefit from the defeat of capitalists. Marx made a deep and profound contribution to humanity's understanding of the workings of capitalism. However, this part of Marx's analysis does not stand up to scrutiny. The problem is that the European working classes are not fighting the capitalists and have abandoned the apparent frontline revolutionary role ascribed to them by him. Instead, they have aligned themselves with the capitalists and effectively supported the capitalist agenda so long as they received better pay and conditions for themselves. This is a very important analysis, actually, because what you have is the working classes in places like here, in Britain. You have the working classes as really quite well off in worldwide terms, and that includes those of us that are Africans who are members of the working classes over here. Compared to our sisters and brothers back home, the masses of our sisters and brothers back home, we're actually quite well off. You know, we actually have higher disposable incomes. We actually have greater life expectancy. And then when you look more closely at our situation inside somewhere like Britain, then even though we're better off than our sisters and brothers back home, and I'm talking about the masses, not the rich ones, but the masses of our people back home, even though we're better off than the masses of our people back home, when we're compared to Europeans living in the same vicinity as us, then suddenly we have lower life expectancy, we have lower incomes, you know, we have more deaths in custody, you know, we have more expulsions from school. So we are disadvantaged against the European working classes, even though we come into the working classes in the metropolitan area, most of us. We are worse off than the European working classes, but we still find ourselves generally better off, I'm talking about economically now, than our sisters and brothers back home in the motherland. Reading on. At the time of writing, Marx could not have seen this pattern of European working classes' behaviour. His reasoning was limited by the state of European knowledge at that time. His supposition was mainly based on an analysis of the initial stage of industrialisation in Britain. It was also limited by the fact that Marx did not devote much effort to the study of non-European societies, just over 400 pages of his Das Kapital. His analysis is fundamentally Eurocentric in character. Marx's interpretation of the role of the European working class is incorrect because of its tendency towards analysing class on the national rather than international level. So what Marx was doing is he was looking at the world through the prism of European eyes. You couldn't expect anything else from him, he's a European. So he was looking at the world through that prism, and that gives a particular perspective on the world, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be the right perspective. And even if it is the right perspective, it's not the right perspective for everyone, because it is limited by its European prism. So the first thing is that he was looking at the world through the prism of through the eyes of Europe. But the second thing that he was doing is he was looking at class as a national phenomenon. And by that, what I mean is he was looking at inside each nation, you had, a group of exploiters, the capitalists, and you had the working class, or you had the peasants in some nations. And what he was doing is he was looking at individual nations, and he was saying that what's going to happen in those individual nations is there's going to be a clash of those classes. And then those classes, after the clash, the poorer people, the working class, as Marx would have called them, another term that would have been used is proletariat, that class of people would eventually win that battle, take over the nation, and then would become socialist. So Marx's analysis in practice didn't work at the national level, because the system had some tricks up its sleeve that he had not foreseen. So let's look ahead and see what some of these tricks were. The next section is 5.12, sub-entitled Towards a Correction. Marx made a significant error as a result of his faulty analysis. He failed to predict the 1917 socialist revolution in an agrarian, backward country like Russia. Now, remember, at that stage in 1917, Russia was not yet an industrial power. And because it wasn't an industrial power, it did not yet have any meaningful working class. The working class comes from the fact that there is industry. And then people leave the countryside to come and live in cities. The cities are built to house workers for factories. So you have factories, and because the factories need workers, you build lots of houses around them, yeah, and those houses eventually become cities. So you have lots of factories surrounded by lots of houses. They become cities, they become urban, etc., etc. That's where all of that actually comes from. And then inside those cities, what you then have are working class people. You know, their occupation is to work with advanced industry, or, you know, advanced new tools, if you like, in order to make things more cheaply, which can then be dispersed, you know, around the nation, depending on what means are chosen to disperse those new goods around the nation. And of course, Russia had not gone through that process. Russia didn't really have cities at the time. It was still an agricultural economy. And there was hardly a working class in Russia because it had not gone through an industrial revolution at that stage of its development. But somehow, without a working class, the Russian Revolution happened and the peasants took over. It wasn't the working class, it was the peasants who took over. And of course, Marx was saying that you needed to build a working class first in order for the working class to take over, because the peasants did not have the capacity, did not have the capability to take over. And this is where his analysis was faulty, because in real life, it was the peasants that took over in Russia. Now, reading on. Nkrumah puts Marx's error into context with the following explanation. And I'm quoting Nkrumah now. This is a direct quote from the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. In the industrially more developed countries, capitalism, far from disappearing, became infinitely stronger. This strength was only achieved by the sacrifice of two principles which had inspired early capitalism, namely the subjugation of the working classes within each individual country and the exclusion of the state from any say in the control of capitalist enterprise. By abandoning these two principles and substituting for them welfare states based on high working class living standards, on a state-regulated capitalism at home, the developed countries succeeded in exporting their internal problem and transferring the conflict between rich and poor from the national to the international stage. Marx had argued that the development of capitalism would produce a crisis within each individual capitalist state, because within each state the gap between the haves and have-nots would widen, and to the point where conflict would be inevitable, and that would be the it would be the capitalists who would be defeated. The basis of his argument is not invalidated by the fact that the conflict, which he had predicted as a national one, did not everywhere take place on a national scale, but has been transferred instead onto the world stage. World capitalism has postponed its crisis, but only at the cost of transforming it into an international crisis. The danger is now not civil war in individual states provoked by intolerable conditions in those states, but international war provoked ultimately by the misery of the majority of mankind who daily grow poorer and poorer. So Marx was just wrong on that particular point of, national bourgeoisies, as he would call it, the elites, conflicting with national working classes, as he would call it, the other name that he would use for it is proletariat. What actually happened was the bourgeoisie, to use the language that Marx used, the exploiters, the lords as they were in pre-industrial states, the lords were defeated by the peasants. And it was out of that conflict that you saw a revolution arising. And we still haven't seen revolution in the sense that Marx mentioned to us happen anywhere in the world. The working classes are so happy with their plight that they will not revolt against their masters, even though their masters are exploiting them. Let me continue reading. Hold on, let me just... So, Marx's error is not insurmountable. But the problem is that some Marxists go on repeating the error regardless of historical reality. While seeing themselves as internationalists, they often stick rigidly to this national class analysis. They appear determined to put the European working class at the forefront of revolutionary activity, even though reality does not support their analysis. Harold Cruse explains the contradiction in the following way. And Cruse, who is one of our intellectuals going back to the 1930s, so it's almost 100 years ago now, Cruse made this analysis, and I think it's an important and good analysis to share. He said, Lenin dealt most thoroughly with how men or classes received their sense perceptions of the world. But Marxists today bypass this aspect of dialectics because they believe that the social role of the proletariat alone settles the question for all time. While Marxists have tried to make world reality for their dialectical perceptions, but world developments require that dialectical conceptions cannot come from the minds of Western Marxists, whose philosophical views have become principally rooted in the crisis reality of the Western world and cannot transcend the conceptual limitations of that world. They talk revolution, but revolution is being made by others. World socialist developments are running ahead of the world socialist theory. William F. Ward says the principles of historical materialism are applicable everywhere, provided they are applied with full consideration of the facts in each case. But the question Wade does not discuss, who is to determine this? Those who are making the world revolution, or those in the West whose dialectical views are anchored in the lethargy of the white working class. Marxism theory of knowledge, that's dialectics, implies that if the backward peoples of the world are carrying themselves into the mainstream of socialism, instead of being led there with the aid of advanced nations, as Trotsky saw it, then the backward peoples must replace white working class as the chosen people of the dialectical functioning of world society. Hence, if historical science or dialectics is to be considered truly scientific, it must be developed and verified in life by inclusion of the social experiences, the history, the ideas and political philosophies, and the point of view of the backward people that count today the world over. For it is their social consciousness that is determining which way history is moving. Dialectical materialism is no longer the philosophy of the proletariat, that is, the European proletariat. as Marxists, as the Western Marxists would have it. So Cruz is emphasizing this point that European working class, they talk revolution. They make a lot of noise about revolution. They give themselves the position of privilege in the revolution as though they're some sort of head of the revolution. They see themselves as being in charge of the revolution. But when you examine them, none of them have ever created it. You know, they're at the back. You know, they want to lead the revolution, but they're at the back of the revolution. They're the last ones to actually know what's happening in revolutionary time. But because of their arrogance, their racism combined with arrogance, they see themselves as the ones who are going to lead the revolutionary process, and they want to stick their nose in everybody else's business and think that they can lead other people's revolutionary developments. And of course, this is complete, total and utter nonsense, just a figment of their racist imaginations. Let's continue, I'll read on. Some Marxists doggedly maintain the position that the European working class must lead the revolution, despite the fact that Vladimir Lenin, Mao Zedong and Kwame Nkrumah corrected Marx's error. They each understood that class is an international phenomenon, that the capitalist system can only be properly understood in the international context, that the global capitalist system is comprised of a dominant centre and a dominated periphery, that the capitalist system, fortified with everything up to and including nuclear weapons, is strong in its centre whilst being weak in its periphery, where it is forced to rely on a relatively fragile neo-colonial puppet class to do its anti-people oppressive bidding. Now, so we're seeing a different analysis coming up to the analysis that was offered by Marx. We see another European, one of his followers, Lenin, correcting him. We see Asian, political leaders correcting him, Mao Zedong. We see African political leaders correcting him, Kwame Nkrumah. And the correction that they're making is they're saying, look, you lot have not done revolution. I'm talking about you lot being the working class in advanced capitalist societies. You lot have never done revolution. You lot have never conducted revolution. You just sat down and gone on strike for your increased pay wage, increased pay and those kinds of things. But you've never actually gone out to overthrow the society, which is giving you, what in comparison to the rest of the world is a good living. The only people to have done that are those on the periphery. In other words, those that are far away from the industrialization. The working class are close to industrialization, and they're getting what the capitalists call the trickle-down effect. In other words, there's lots of money sloshing around, and they get a little bit of change, and because they get a little bit of change, they're richer than other people who are far away and can't get any of the change at all. So what was actually happening in real life was the working class was saying, well, we've got TVs, we've got cars, it may be uncomfortable, but we've got some nice trappings here. We can have leather sofas for us to sit in. We've got central heating to keep us warm in the winter. They can have a bath. Daily, they've got baths and showers in their houses, etc. Actually, they decided, well, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I won't bother to have a revolution. But for people who are living, in communities where there's no toilet, you have to dig your pit. Yeah. For communities that are living where, you haven't got a cooker in the house, you have to build your own fire in order to cook your food. For communities where there's no fridge, you have to go out and look for your food freshly, etc. For societies that didn't have TVs, and motor cars running up and down all over the place. For those kinds of societies, the experience was different. And so the peasants peasant is not an insulting term, by the way. Some people think it's an insulting term. Peasant is not an insulting term. It describes a particular type of farmer. That's what the term peasant does. It describes a particular type of farmer, somebody who works with the land, whereas the worker, technically, is one who works with in industrial equipment. And so that's the delineation between the two. And the one who works with industrial equipment tends to be more highly skilled than the ones who work directly with the land. And so a delineation then exists between the two. And because the worker is more highly skilled, Marx's assumption was that the worker would be best placed to dismantle the capitalist system. And in fact, the history has shown that assumption to be wrong, that it was the less skilled people or less skilled peasant in the periphery of capitalism that was the one that was making that were the ones that were making revolution. Now let me just explain. There's the metropolitan part of capitalism and there's the peripheral part of capitalism. When we speak of the metropolitan part of capitalism, we're talking about the major cities. London, where I'm based, is part of capitalism's metropolitan centre. New York, Washington, Paris, Berlin, all of those major cities of Europe and places dominated by Europe, those are all part of the metropolitan centre of capitalism. But now when you go to somewhere like the Sahara, or you go into the bush in any part of Africa where we've got bush, when you go out onto the plains of Africa, when you go into the mountains of Africa, you're talking about the periphery as far as capitalism is concerned. You will not find there heavy equipment, heavy machinery, except to steal the wealth from our ground. But we haven't got heavy equipment which we're using to make things and make things better, adding value to the resources that we have. And so this is the reason why we don't have a meaningful working class in Africa. Now, if you looked at South Africa, because they had their own Europeans there, they did allow a little bit of industrialization to occur in the southern tip of our continent. But generally, capitalism kept Africa out of industrialization. Africa was not the only one kept out of industrialization. Asia too was largely kept out of industrialization, but they have managed to overcome that barrier in a way that we so far have not been able to do. Let me read on. So Lenin, Mao Zedong, and Nkrumah concluded that the principal revolutionary front has to be where the majority of the world is. That's in the periphery, the capitalist colonies and near-colonies, in other words, where we live, where African people are en masse. In these regions of the world, workers are few in number whilst peasants form the substantial majority. This means that it is the peasants that are most likely to be at the forefront of revolution. This in turn means that the consciousness of the peasants in particular needs to be raised substantially in order to achieve worldwide revolutionary change. If we want revolution, we must educate the peasants because they are the ones who are feeling the hunger. They are the ones who have an intimate desire for change. They are the ones who want to make their situation better, not the working classes enjoying their settees and their TVs and their flash motor cars, etc., etc. So moving on to 5.2 now. 5.2 is entitled The Origin of the Working Class and Their Ill Treatment of African People. And the subheading below that, 5.21, is Slavery Led to the Emergence of the Working Class. And I read, the enslavement of African people created unprecedented levels of wealth for the imperialists who controlled the slavery system. As part of their agenda of stealing other people's wealth, they managed to usurp African people's labour without having to pay. The imperialists then used the massive quantities of wealth they had accumulated from slavery as capital to invest. These investments were the cause of many new beginnings, including a proliferation in the development of technological inventions in Europe, the creation of factories in Europe, the development of mass production in Europe, the development of industrialization in Europe, the birth of capitalism as a social, political and economic system, the birth of the capitalist phase of world history, and the birth of modern racism, as we heard from Maccabee just now. Reading on. These changes also meant that the newly created mass-producing factories of Europe needed labour in order to operate effectively. This new need was hindered by the fact that the labour of European peasants was tied to the land in a form of bondage called serfdom. The requirements imposed by the newly emerging capitalist system meant that the European peasants had to be released from serfdom by their lords and masters. Their release was one of the essential ingredients that brought capitalism into existence. It was the release of European peasants from serfdom that gave birth to European working class. The European working class was created by the new capitalist elite for its own diabolical purposes. The European working class was also born out of the terrible suffering of enslaved African people. The European working class was created precisely so that the capitalists could exploit them as a means of making profit. In order to resist this exploitation, the working class was forced to organise for self-defence. Trade unions are the result of European working classes' organised struggle against capitalism. The same capitalist system that was created by and profited from anti-African slavery. Trade unions, which were the working class's legitimate response to capitalist exploitation, have at their root the terrible suffering of enslaved African people. The outcome of this process is that the European working class suffer capitalist oppression on the basis of class. African people suffer double oppression on the basis of class and race. And African women suffer triple oppression on the basis of class, race and gender. This is an important point as we are on International Women's Day effectively. We're in International Women's Month right now. And we must understand that all women do not suffer the same. African women suffer more, because African women have to bear the brunt of racism also, and the majority of African women are among the poorer sections of society, which means that they also have to suffer class oppression. Women do not all suffer the same. In short, if there was no slavery, there could be no capitalism. If there was no capitalism, there would be no working class. If there was no working class, there would be no trade union movement. If capitalism, the working class and trade unions all owe their existence to the enslavement of African people. They are all indebted to and owe reparations to African people from whose genocidal scale suffering, that is exploitation and oppression, they arose. They were all born out of the terrible suffering of enslaved African people. We can add to that, incidentally, when you follow that chain through properly. Let me say it again. In short, if there was no capitalism, there would be no working class. If there was no working class, there would be no trade union movement. If there was no trade union movement, there would be no Labour Party. Think about it. Yeah? Labour Party comes out of the trade union movement. The trade union movement comes out of the working class. The working class comes about as a result of industrialization, which creates factories, etc., and all of those kinds of things, which gives them work, which turns them into the working class. And those factories, those new inventions, the things that they call the spinning jenny and all those kinds of things, they come as a result of the millions and millions of pounds that enslavers made from the free labour of African people. So if it's not for African people, if it's not for the money that they made out of African people, if it's not for the blood of African people, if it was not for the sweat and tears of African people, none of these other things would exist. The Labour Party owes its very existence to African people. The working class owe their very existence to African people. And this is why racism is so deeply embedded inside of them. Because they are born out of racism. And they can't separate themselves from it. They're not even trying, really. But it's a real difficulty for them to separate themselves from it, because they kill themselves at their root to separate themselves from racism. And so we understand the position of African people in this capitalist order. We gave birth to everything. Everything that they have is based on the stolen labour of African people, the stolen lives of African people. Absolutely everything that they have. Now let's just continue that analysis. Let's take that analysis a little bit further. The next section is entitled, and it's section 5.22. Slavery led to divergent class interests. Now, it's important to understand that Europeans tried to make out that the working class have got it so hard, they understand the African problem. Yeah? And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of the categorical differences between their situation and ours. And there are serious categorical differences, because they exist because of our suffering. So that immediately it's obvious that we're not in the same class, that there are different classes and they are benefiting from our suffering. But let's read on. The transition from feudalism to capitalism in European history corresponds to the transition from slavery to colonialism in African history. All of these social systems were linked by the advent of industrialization. Slavery brought industrialization into being. In doing so, it killed off feudalism and brought capitalism and colonialism into existence. These processes combined to create distinctly differing class interests for what hitherto had been the roughly equal class position of peasants in Africa and Europe. So before slavery, people working the land in Africa and people working the land in Europe were of roughly equal social status. It wasn't that Africans were necessarily richer than Europeans, or that Europeans were richer than Africans. We were growing the food that we needed. We were feeding ourselves naturally from the soil, and even the Europeans were doing that at that stage of their development. And so what you had was a kind of general kind of equality. Yes, of course, we had it better. We had sunshine, etc., etc., and they had to work out how they were going to survive in the cold. But people across the world were just generally roughly on an equal level. Now, we were naturally wealthier, and I don't mean this in a superior sense, but we were naturally wealthier because Africa is wealthier than any other soil. So it just made sense that African people would be a little bit wealthier than others, but it wasn't as a result of exploiting other people. You know, our soil produces more food, you know, more variety of food, etc. We have more animals, you know. That's just something that was a gift given to us by the Creator, you know, and we didn't use it for superiority over other people. But then what happens is, as Europeans start encroaching on African soil and stealing African people into slavery, the act of stealing African people and putting them into forced labor camps, which they call plantations, over in the Americas, that act made the lives of African people worse. It made the lives of African people stolen worse, and it made the lives of African people who were not stolen worse as well. Because when all your young people get taken away, then the old people who are not so, you know, they're past their time for doing that kind of work, they have to go back to doing that kind of work now. So we were just disrupted completely. But what that disruption did is it built up masses and masses of wealth. They used that wealth. They created new, what they call inventions. Those inventions were then used to create industrialization. And then that industrialization created massive profits for them and boosted the working class, the peasants in Europe into working class. And of course, we had been downtrodden into slavery. So moving on, the emergence of capitalism brought with it a number of distinct differences in the living conditions of the former peasants of Africa and Europe. So, for instance, it is beyond dispute that in order for capitalism to be born, African peasantry was subjected to 1. The most savage, inhumane and brutal process of systematic kidnapping ever experienced on earth. This also highlighted the inconsistency that whilst the European working classes were legally protected from being sold or enslaved, being sold was part of the everyday experience of enslaved African people. It goes without saying that whilst the murder of a member of the European working class was against the law, no such protection was afforded enslaved African people. So they're trying to say that they suffered like us. But, you know, when they got killed, it was a crime. When we were killed, it's just an incident. You know? Nowadays, if you go and kill a dog, you see what happened to you, you end up in prison. And in those days, if you killed African people, nothing would happen to you. And of course, that remains the same now. We see their police killing African people on a regular basis. Nothing happens to them. So their rules remain the same, even though they prettied them up now and try to pretend that we are afforded the same protections. 2. Compulsory extradition from their homeland to an unknown destination. A much softer version of this caliber of torture is today called extraordinary rendition. During this inhumane extradition process, African people were packed into the bottom of ships in much the same way that dead sardines are packed into tins. Those that survived this catastrophic ordeal were rendered homeless and destitute. By contrast, the European working classes began to experience objective improvements in their health and housing conditions. So out of our enslavement comes things like their National Health Service, comes things like their education system. All of that is built on the exploitation of African people, the enslavement of African people, and also the colonization of African people. That's where all this thing comes from. This is why it's born out of racism. And because it's born out of racism, they cannot unracize it, if I can make up language now. Yeah? They just can't undo it, because it's actually born out of racism. And this is the reason why you can't even talk to them on this subject. Yeah? They can't even hear you when you're speaking to them, when you're telling them this truth. They start to babble on, or they just go silent and run away, or the brave ones might even come and fight you if they want to get their head bust. You know, all kinds of mad responses come out of them because deep down they know. 3. Imprisonment on forced labour camps, misleadingly referred to as plantations. Against the background of the wholesale restriction of movement for enslaved African people, capitalism allowed new European working class greater opportunities to move more freely than before, both in their own homelands and abroad. In their homelands, European working classes tended to move from the countryside to newly formed cities in order to look for paid work. Internationally, their new freedom of movement contributed to the proliferation of settler colonies controlled by European capitalist elite. British imperialism, for instance, committed systematic acts of genocide in order to impose settler colonies in Canada, US Satan, the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, Rhodesia, and South Africa. As part of this process, a small section of the European working class managed to accumulate wealth beyond its wildest dreams and went up in class status. So you know, what we are seeing here is a situation where African people, if they try to get away from what they call the plantations, the forced labour camps, if you tried to run away, you call a runaway, they would chop off your foot. For men, they would chop off your genitals. You know, they would do all kinds of wickedness to you to prevent you from getting away from enslavement. And it got so bad, they even made a name for it. They said that Africans trying to run away from slavery have got a mental illness. And they created a name for it. They called it drapetomania. That's what they called it. They called it drapetomania. Yeah? And this meant that an African trying to run away from slavery was mad. So African people were existing in a situation where their movement was restricted. Yeah, there were certain boundaries and you can't go outside those boundaries. And if you did, they'd put chains on your feet. And they'd even put chains around your neck and all kinds of other things as well to prevent the African people from moving outside the boundaries which they determined. Whereas our enslavement actually allowed the European working classes to now go on journeys. They were no longer bound to the land in the country. They were no longer obliged to sit under the feet of their feudal lord. They could now go to the city and look for work and enjoy their pubs, which is one of the things that they like doing, drinking beer in the pub. You know, they could have these kind of pastimes and parties and all these kinds of things on the back of our suffering. And some of them became wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. Some of them even came to Africa, stole masses and masses of land, and then on the back of our land became just billionaires. We're not even talking about millions anymore. Just wealth beyond the wildest possible dreams. So their situation was not the same as African people. A fourth example, the wholesale theft of their labour. The birth of capitalism created conditions where the European working classes began to receive wages, that is, more value for their labour power. There is no doubt that as a group they have developed a liking for wages since they have never given them up, and are willing to strike to maintain their purchasing value. By contrast, Capitalism came into being precisely because enslaved African people got no wages for their labour. It was the failure to pay them wages that allowed the capitalists to accumulate massive volumes of wealth. So we see here another categorical difference between the enslaved African and the European working class. The European working class gets paid. They can at least use their money to, save up and do their whatever little bits and pieces they want. We just had to work until we died. Average life expectancy for us, when we got to Haiti, we had 7 years to live if we were lucky. Average life expectancy was 7 years. When we got to Jamaica, average life expectancy was 3 years. Barbados, so that was Barbados, it was 3 years. Yeah. When we got to Jamaica, 1 in 2 people were dead in 2 years. This gives you an indication of the kind of suffering that we were going through whilst they were happily picking up their wages. Their suffering was not the same as our suffering. And 5, the 5th example and final example that I've got here is a calculated ideological attack against the consciousness of African people. Now, this happened at many different levels. For example, enslaved African people were actively prevented from reading and writing in the historical phase that gave birth to capitalism. In contrast, the newly emerging capitalist system recognized the need for a relatively skilled workforce, and the European working class found that schools were for the first time made available to children. So we were prevented from reading, we were prevented from writing, we were prevented from doing arithmetic and other spheres of learning. And on the back of that prevention, they were now building schools in the 1800s. They were building schools here in Britain for their children. That's when their formal education comes into being. When they began to switch from church to school. Yeah, that was in the late 1800s when all of that was going on. They were now being taught how to read. They were now being taught how to write. They were now being taught how to do arithmetic. So what you see is a complete difference in terms of access to education. And of course that continues to this day. They give us hell to get into their universities, for instance. Yeah. Whereas they make access for their own children that much easier. If you're an African overseas student and you come to England to study, you will not pay less than £20,000 a year to be on one of their courses. Can you imagine that? Not less than £20,000 a year. A 3-year course, you have to find £60,000 to sit down in one of their universities. That is serious. That is absolutely serious. So, they have it on lockdown in that sense. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive examination of the categorical class differences between enslaved African people and the newly emergent European working class. However, the overall picture is undeniable. Despite the wretchedness of the conditions confronting the European working class, their class position and quality of life objectively improved as slavery brought capitalism into being. In order for capitalism to come into existence, the quality of life of African people objectively became substantially worse. The working class was born out of slavery. This category of humanity came into existence as a direct result of the blood, sweat, tears, and genocidal suffering of African people. In fact, had it not been for the genocidal scale mass enslavement of African people, there would have been no capital accumulation, no system of capitalism, no industrialization, no mass-producing factories, and therefore no working class. the suffering of African people brought capitalism into being. Capitalism then created improved conditions for the European working class, who received a relative bonus for their labour in the form of wages. Now, let me just bring a little bit of music, I think, back into the scene. So let's see what we can share here.
It's a black thanks, you better understand. Musa, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, Idi Amin, Nelson Mandela, Amiri Baraka, Sheikh Anta Diop, Eric Williams, Neely Fuller, J.A. Rogers, Carol Taylor, Frantz Fanon, Chancellor Williams, Walter Sisulu, Nat Turner, Shaka, Angela Davis, General Monk, WLIB, MGT and GCC, the FOI, Peter Tosh, Stokely Carmichael, Miles Davis, Max Roach, Montague Cobb, Larry Doby, Aesop, Mansa Musa, Muammar el-Gaddafi, the Ayatollah Khomeini, Stephen Biko, Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, Walter Rodney, Kwame Nkrumah, Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Juwanza Kunjufu, Paul Robeson, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Dr. Ben, Marcus Garvey, Paul Cuffey, Queen Nzinga, Imhotep, General Tyreek, WWRL, Louis Armstrong, Martin Luther King, Public Enemy, Adam Clayton Powell, Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, Bob Law, Michael Manley, Medgar Evers, Rashim Khalik, Mark Riley, Gil Noble, Little Rock 9, The Weathermen, Michael Stewart, Yusuf Hawkins, John Carlos, Geronimo Pratt, the Black Panther Party, Drusilla Dundee Houston, Luke Skywalker, the Nation of Islam, Jimi Hendrix, W.E.B. Du Bois, Fidel Castro, Tawana Brawley, Maryam Muhammad, Brother Akbar Muhammad, Master Farad Muhammad, Amina Rasul, H. Rap Brown, Malcolm X, Sojourner Truth, Elijah McCoy, Lisa Williamson, Haq Islam, Rosa Parks, The Last Poets, The Mau Mau, Billie Holiday, Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, Steve Coakley, Takia Shah, Gary Bird, Che Guevara, Chicago 8, New York 7, Michael Griffin, Eleanor Bumpers, Tommy Smith, Sam Cooke, Anwar Ahmed, Crispus Attucks, Frederick Douglass, The Dope Busters, Gil Scott-Heron, Al Sharpton, Muhammad Ali, Ava Muhammad, Ashada Shakur, Khadijah Farrakhan, Tanetta Muhammad, Harriet Tubman, Ras Baraka, Minister Louis Farrakhan Muhammad, Malik Sigma Sai, Stevie Wonder, Toussaint Lay Overture, Winnie Mandela, Jesse Jackson, Dr. Maulana Karenga, Bob Marley, Denmark Vesey, Hank Aaron, Ethel Wicks, Louise Griffin, Vivian Smith, Doris Peacock, Shirley Young, Helen O'Brien, Grambling State University, Roosevelt High School, Hempstead High School, Clark College, Morehouse College, Cheney State, Bennett College, Michael Jordan, the Godfather of Soul, James Brown, Alvin Ailey, the Black Untouchables, Joe
Yeah, that was something of a roll call there, and I have to say that I'm delighted. I'm delighted to say, I should say, that I am joined in the studio by one of our sisters, and my sister. I'm going to ask you actually to introduce yourself to our sisters and brothers.
Oh, greetings, great uprising. Greetings and great uprising to you, Brother Omowale. This is Griot Chinyere, and I'd like to give thanks and praises for the dawning of this day, for the opportunity to be here. Give thanks to Pastor Bless and his beautiful son who run this radio station and give people an opportunity to share the works that they are doing. So I'm Griot Chinyere, I'm a storyteller, and I am the founder of Shanti Chi, a storytelling company, and the Inne Argo African Storytelling Festival.
Yeah, so tell me a little something about the, is it the Inne Argo?
Inne
Argo.
Argo.
Inne Argo.
No, there's a W. Argo.
Inne Argo. If you can actually pronounce it better than I can, sisters and brothers, please feel free to ring in and offer me some correction. Yeah, the number to ring in and offer me some correction is 07 9444 31366. So that was a lesson for me. Yeah.
Do you know what it means?
Oh no! Please help me.
It means Mother of Divine Nation.
Ah.
Yes.
Right,
So
so
the
this is very
Inner
powerful.
Argo is yes, Mother of Divine Nation. It's a spirit, an energy. It's the spirit and the energy of the healer and of the storyteller. So she brings into manifestation, into unifestation, just through her words. So she brought herself into, this is Igbo mythology, cosmology. She brought herself into being by speaking herself into being, and she brought everything else into being just with words. So that's what Inne Argo, that's the energy of Inne Argo, and that's the spirit that rules the storyteller and the healer, the dibia we call them in Igbo culture. That's the energy.
Okay, so this comes straight out of African culture, the Igbo part.
Yes.
Of African culture.
Yes.
And so, can you explain to me what is a griot?
So the word, first of all, I'll say the word griot is a French word that describes an African tradition, and the African tradition is that of the family who holds the stories of the community and passes it down. So there's the griot families, but you also have griot individuals. So with the griot family, if you want to know anything about your family, they hold all of those stories there. Their job is also to create prophecy. So understanding and knowing the structure of how a story works is magic, and then once you can use that to create prophecy. It's an art form that we're losing, or we seem to have lost, because we seem to be stuck in a cycle at the moment of all the terrible things that have happened to us, and we're struggling to find how to get out of it. And this is one way. This is one of many ways that can help us by knowing how to use the language and how to structure the word.
Okay,
It can be Inne Argo. That's why the village is called Inne Argo, because it means we can talk into existence that which we wish to happen.
You mentioned a village. Which village is this?
So this village, this is called the Inne Argo African Storytelling Village. That's what I've called it. And it's based on the fact that when I went home as a child, and every time I go to the motherland, being in the village vibration is something that we're missing here in London and in most big cities. We miss it, and as part of our melanin-rich culture is something that we need. I feel that we need. So creating the Inne Argo village is a space where people will talk about you, but they talk about you with love in your heart, in their heart. So like when I went to my mother's village, when I was 18, this is when I was older, I was 18, I went off, hid in the bush to go and smoke a cigarette. By the time I got to my grandparents' house, I thought I was well hidden. The whole family was lined up outside the house. And I was like, oh, did something happen? And so then my brother, who was the youngest person in that line, he spoke to me. He said, where have you been? I said, oh, I just went for a walk. He said, what did you do? I said, I was just looking around. He said, did you smoke? I was like, in my head, I was like, how did they know? I was hidden in a bush. How did they know? But of course, in the village now, I'm a stranger there. So if I go anywhere, somebody's looking, and they would have sent somebody to follow me, not to spy on me, but just to make sure that I'm okay. Yeah. So then my brother, told me off, said, you shouldn't smoke. He said, you shouldn't smoke because you're a woman. And I said, really, I shouldn't smoke because it's bad for me, not because I'm a woman, That doesn't really have a place in your argument. He said, okay, you shouldn't smoke and blah, blah, blah. And bringing these kind of things into the village is not good. So he gave me a good talking to. And at the time, I was like, sure. But looking back, it's a guidance, and it's good that everybody's involved with the whole situation. Everybody was there when he was talking to me. It wasn't just me and him. He didn't take me to one side. It's everybody's business. We're always going, oh, why I don't want to check my business because I don't want no one knowing my business. But actually, in the village, people need to know your business so they can take care of you and you can take care of other people.
And this points to perhaps one of the differences between people knowing your business in a village environment, in a loving village environment, where knowing your business is not used maliciously against you. And certain characters that might know your business and then use it to attempt to destroy you in a metropolitan environment such as this. I mean, have you got a comment that you'd make on that contrast?
Do you know, it's you pointing that out really is it speaks to one of the problems that we have with being able to be in that village setup, because we are grown here and there is a lot of suspicion. You know, why you want to know my business, why are you asking me these questions, what you getting into it for, and it's always quite negative. It's never, oh, you want to know my business because I know you're looking out for me, you want to take care of me. And that mindset, the difference is stark. And so because we've grown here, there's part of us that has that mindset. Now, to transform from that mindset to a positive mindset is a journey. Now, there's a lot of people here that are going, yeah, I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to go live in Africa and I'm going to go and teach Africans something. Number one, with that kind of mindset, you can't teach Africans anything. Do you know how to clean water? Do you know how to grow food? Do you know how to do any of those things? And if you have that kind of mindset of suspicion, then all you're going to do is bring more suspicion to the motherland. And so that contradicts what we're trying to do. So the idea is that, first of all, let's clean our minds. Let's get ourselves into a village vibe. Let's reconnect with the earth, because the best way to cleanse ourselves is to connect with the Mother Earth. And then, and then we can think about going to the motherland to learn more about who we are and what our purpose is. Not to come with that European mindset of, yeah, I'm going to go. People have gone to Africa for 2 weeks and they go, yeah, I'm going to teach Africans. I'm going to teach Africans things. You know, I've been here 2 weeks and I know what I can teach them. You can't teach them anything. You have to go and sit. Like this, I told a story earlier on. You have to learn to sit at the feet of your elders and listen, so that you can trust again. And that trust really is about trusting yourself, trusting your family and your community. Now, don't worry about outside of that. Knowing it's about sharing love, as you said earlier on. Love. I want to know your business because I want to know the best way that I can help you and support you on your journey. And I'm opening myself up to you because I trust that you have my best interest at heart. And the only way that you can support me is if I'm open with you. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to just pursue it with you just a little bit further.
Okay.
Yeah. Over here, you got newspapers. There's one of them called The Sun, for instance, or and I think Sunday Mirrors, and all those kinds of things. And when they delve into the personal lives of people that they call celebrities, the result for the people is not pleasant. Yeah. Can you contrast that with your experience of the delving into people's personal lives, if I can put it in those terms, in the African setting, in the African village setting? Can you think of any examples of how in African culture we could do that in a way that is not designed to
destroy? So the thing that comes to mind is there's this. You don't see it very often nowadays, but there is this way, like if somebody, so let's start with celebrities. Normally when the newspapers and everybody's getting involved, it's very judgmental, and it's about, okay, you're a bad person and we're going to destroy you, and if we don't shoot you, we're going to destroy your mind and pull you apart so you feel so bad about who you are, which doesn't really serve anybody. One of the things in our ancient culture that would happen is if somebody stepped out of line, is they call it a love circle. So you'd put somebody in that circle, and everybody outside of the circle would just be throwing love at them so that they would see the errors of their way. There'd be a lot of conversation, there'd be a lot of stories told, lots of proverbs, lots of discussion, and lots of love thrown, because this person is a member of this community. And if this community is to thrive, then everybody in the community must also thrive. So if someone steps out of it, but you want them steps out of the value system of the community, and you want the community to grow, it's either that person's going to be totally sent away, but then that doesn't serve anybody because they're going to go somewhere else with their poisoned self, or you put them in the love circle and you send love to them and you give them guidance on how to be a better person and what the benefits of that is. And there's a lot of storytelling and a lot of proverbs that go into, and a lot of love and a lot of energy that goes into healing that person, because it would be seen as a sickness if you're behaving badly, if you're beating your wife, or beating your husband, or or stealing from your neighbor. Then something's gone wrong, and we as a community need to work out what's gone wrong and how can we return it so that the balance is returned and harmony is returned. So I would say that's a stark difference. Like when the newspapers gather around, your life is finished. They're not sending love at you. They just want to sell papers, and it's drama and it's negative, and they'll dig up every kind of negative thing about you. They'll even make stuff up if it's not already there. Then they'll make stuff up. So we don't even know what the truth is anymore. But what I know is that if you find love, especially for our people, when we go into those areas and we think that we've made it, and then we upset somebody, they come for you and they make up all kinds of stories. So I don't know what anybody in the media has or hasn't done, but I know it's hateful. It's a really hateful arena to be in when somebody comes for you and gets to know your business, and that's why people don't want to chat their business, because they think, they're going to use it against me, as opposed to the other arena where everybody does know your business and they want to use their love to heal you, because it just makes for a better world when people are feeling better.
Now tell me, you're a member of an organisation. Is it Shanti Chi?
Shanti Chi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us about Shanti Chi.
Shanti Chi is a storytelling company, and what do? We perform, we tell stories, we train people in the old traditions of storytelling. We run workshops. We use storytelling as an empowerment tool. We use storytelling as a leadership tool. We've been going for, I think 11 years is how long we've been going. And the profile around storytelling is about using storytelling to be proud of who we are and our culture, and knowing our purpose, why we're here, and how to use language for our benefit, speaking affirmatively to ourselves and the people around us. So that's what Shanti Chi does. The remit is to promote, preserve, and to celebrate the old traditions of African storytelling.
So are there any activities that are coming up in the near future that, for Shanti Chi that, listeners might perhaps have some interest in?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Mr. Omowale. We do have something coming up. Shanti Chi presents the Inne Argo African Storytelling Festival. It's our 10th. It's the 10th year since we first started. So the first time, when we first started, we were called Sesa Wusuba, which means transform your life. And as time has gone by, we now are known as Inne Argo, Mother of Divine Nation, who speaks things into being. So this year, Shanti Chi's Stimulating African Storytelling Village is going to be out in the British countryside and will be in veneration of our ancestors. Dimila Yakwe, some of you may or may not know her. She's an amazing storyteller. She was an elder. She's passed away, and she deserves honouring. She's got books out there, so if you want to look out for her books, buy one of her books and come and read some of her work at the festival. Dimela, Dimela, Dimela Yakwe. There's Baba Ade, that we know he's a musician and a storyteller, so he told stories through his music, and he promoted the West African culture through everything that he did. And he too was one of those elders that made a difference to people's lives. You know, we've got Toni Morrison. I've spelled it incorrectly. It should be Toni, and I've spelled it with a Y. We all know Toni Morrison, international writer. Again, a talented, phenomenal being who shared her talent with the world and made a difference to how we see ourselves, told our stories, and shared our pains. We're also honouring our family values and the principle of Ubuntu. Ubuntu means I am because we are, therefore I am. So in the Igbo culture, we also have a word called undo, just going back to what you were saying with regards to how the press attack people. So undo means sorry. So if you hurt yourself and I say sorry, I'm not saying sorry because I'm responsible for your pain. I'm sorry because I feel your pain. I'm sorry that you are feeling pain. I don't want you to feel pain, so I say undo. And when I first went to the motherland with my mum, I was 10 and somebody fell over. Now, I've just come from England and now someone fell over. What do you think I did?
No, you did not laugh. I know you did not. I know you did not laugh.
See, that's a no-brainer. I was just some, English girl, and someone fell over. And what do we do in England? We laugh, and I laughed, and everybody looked at me and said, "Oh, why are you laughing?" And I just felt so bad. I mean, it was the first time I was like, wow, because everybody was going undo, and they helped the person up. That's when I really learned. You know, actually, in Europe, when you say sorry, it's like you're responsible for something. Whereas in my culture, when you say sorry, it's because you feel for somebody. So it's a different use, even of that word, a completely different use of the word.
So tell me, when is this event taking place?
Okay, so yes, I'm gonna get through it. So Ubuntu, so there's another thing that we're going to be celebrating. So professional artists, healers, leaders will deliver an opening ceremony followed by a daily program of innovative workshops, enthralling performances, engaging discussions and inspiring masterclasses, including early morning yoga, martial arts, forest night walks, healthy food choices, arts and craft markets, well-being practitioners. The festival ends with a beautiful ancient inspired closing ceremony where the village story is the centerpiece. And this event takes place Thursday the 23rd of July to Sunday the 26th of July. So we will live together for 4 days camping as a village.
So can I ask, am I too old to attend?
We encourage even people with grey hair. I should say silver hair. No, I should say wisdom hair. Even people with wisdom hair. One year we had loads of grandparents and grandchildren. So yes, it's a family event, and we encourage every member of the family to come along. Our eldest camper was 78 and. 78 and she's going to be 81 this year, and she's going to be returning to the festival.
Okay, so there's no upper age limit, no lower age limit?
No upper, no lower. We have babes wrapped on parents' back, so it is literally like a village. It's a whole, every age group being there.
So can I ask, how will we know that our children are safe?
Because we're going to be there with the village mentality. A piece of land is hired out and it's exclusively for us. So it's not open. Because the first time we did it, it was in a field, in a campsite. So people were walking in and out of the field. We did that for a couple of years and we said, no, we just need to have a space where it's just for us so that we can feel those vibes. And we can allow our children to run and be free and to go into the woods and to climb a tree and to sit around the fire. Teach them how to make a fire so you don't have to worry about them burning themselves. We can do that because we hire the whole space. So it's just for us. So in celebration of our 10th anniversary, we are having a community treasure hunt. Let's find the magical Inne Argo African storytelling village. Get all the family involved. So between March and May, we're going to post clues on the Shantichi website and send them out via our social media.
Warmest greetings to your sister or brother. You're live on Bless Radio. How would you like to contribute to the discussion?
Greetings, my brother. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. It's a delight to hear your voice, my brother.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. When I came across your book they're selling on the website, which was good.
Okay, we've got a little bit of echo, so I think our technical people are going to look into that. But yes, but thank you for ringing, and thank you very much for the compliment on the book, my brother. Thank you very much for the compliment on the book.
And I noticed that me and you bumping into each other regular, you know.
Yes, I think we're going to have to make sure that it's not accidental anymore. We're going to have to make time for each other so that we can sit and talk in an African vibe.
Indeed, my brother, indeed, you know.
So tell me, we've been talking about an African village. Is that something that you might be interested in participating in?
Yeah, but I went to the Garvey village. I go to the Garvey village every other Sunday, yeah?
Oh,
and I think, I'm sure the African village could go down very well.
Yes. Our sister Griot Chinyere, it has actually for more than a decade now been recreating an African village vibe in the countryside somewhere in this country in the summer months, and she's literally just telling people about. I wonder if you tell our caller a little something about the
greetings,
village.
brother. What's your name? Sorry.
My name is Colin of the Reggae Exhibition. Yeah?
Oh, greetings, Colin. It's nice to meet you. So yeah, I'd like to encourage you and inspire you and invite you to come to the Inne Argwal African Storytelling Festival Village. We hire out a big piece of land and we invite melanin-rich people only to come with their tents, come with their family, come with their energy, and we have a whole program of things that we do while we're there. We have round the fire under the stars, we have early morning yoga and martial arts, and during the course of the day we do lots of storytelling performances and workshops, and it's a really beautiful spot. That there's an elder, she comes every year and she just sits, she puts her tent up and she sits on her chair and she just watches the whole thing, and she said it just makes her feel so good just to be in that space and to know there's an African space in Britain. So it's for 4 days. It's a whole 4 days. So it's not you go for a few hours and then you go home. You come and you stay, and we are just part of this village vibe together. And it's powerful. I find it powerful, and even though I put all this hard work into it, I still manage to get to enjoy it and enjoy seeing the faces of my people while they're there. I mean, Omowale's been there a couple of times. I think the first time he came kicking, screaming, but then after that he walked all by himself. There's drumming and there's dancing. I mean, it's just vibrant and exciting, and and we have real conversations about how we move forward as a community. We don't have to worry about getting the bus home. Our tent is next door to each other. We wake up to each other. We go back to bed and we say goodnight to each other. How does that sound?
It's all right, something I will be interested in. One big question: how long has it been going, and what part of England is it taking place?
Okay, so that's 2 questions. It's been going for 10 years. So this is the 10 years since it began. And this year, what we're doing is we're trying to encourage people to look for the festival site. So we're not giving the address out yet. We're going to do a competition that starts tomorrow. Yeah, and every week for the next 6 weeks, we'll give out a clue, and we're asking people, get together with your family, your grandchildren, your children, and look on the map and get closer and closer to where it's called In Search of the African Village.
What county is it in?
That's clue number 1. So tomorrow, are you signed up to any of my? Have you got a pen and a paper?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment, because I was going to say I could give you my WhatsApp number. You could join, and then I'd send you the clues tomorrow, and then you find out what county it is or what part, whether it's north, south, east, west, what county it is, and you get zoom in. So you've got the idea already. You've got the idea, and you win a beautiful prize. The first 4 people who get the answer win a beautiful prize.
That's what we could have. We can do it, so we can have outdoors jazz music as well.
It's live music. We have acoustic live music. It's not a PA system. Yeah. So what? Do you play an instrument? Do you play music?
No, I've been in the management of various reggae artists, and now I'm doing the reggae exhibition. As what Omowale could tell you a little bit about that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Tell us. We want to hear about this reggae exhibition. Very important.
The reggae exhibition is to preserve our history. Is to preserve the lyrics, the music, the artists, the record shops, the sales, the management, and all the people involved in it over the years. We have got over 200 pieces of board, 1 meter by 2 meter high. We've got blue spot drum that go back in the early 50s. We got old records. We got leaflets that go back from the early 60s.
Wow.
And most of the record shops that was in London, we got them on board as well.
Wow.
So we're here to preserve the reggae industry, yes. And at the end of the day, we must get hold of a building to be the reggae museum.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cannot wait for them to do that for us. We have to do it for ourselves.
Truly.
So by the hunter will hunt you down and put it in his own name and give it his own overseer to look in as well, yeah? Just the way my good friend is writing all those books about Africa, telling people the story as well. We have to tell our own story.
Yes, absolutely correct. I have a confession to make to everybody who's listening. I have, first of all, I have attended the Iniagu storytelling festival, and I have attended the reggae exhibition, and I have to say that they are both absolutely fantastic events, which I can personally and thoroughly recommend. So you should be taking notes right now so that you can participate in these 2 events. And Elder Colin, I wonder if you'd give us some indication. Do we know when the next reggae exhibition is likely to be?
This is a possibility. It might be next to the Wembley Stadium in that heritage building they've got there in Wembley.
Oh, right. Now, the heritage building, are you talking about the Old Town Hall on 40 Lane?
I don't know the address, but I know it's in Wembley.
Okay.
Next to Town Hall or something will be there for. As you know, that area is the barrow of culture for this year.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But
what I might be interested though is to participate in the African village and take some of our artifacts down there as well.
Now that sounds as though it could be a fantastic idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Sounds as though it could be a fantastic idea. It would need to have a marquee, for that purpose. But I think that could be a fantastic idea.
Well, I've got more for marquee, you know.
Oh, you do? Oh, listen. Can you get your pen now and your paper, and please take down this number so that you can contact me. We can continue the conversation because I think it's a really good idea.
What you could do, give them Malawi.
Yeah. What I'll put the 2 of you in touch. With each other. I'll certainly do that. But there's no harm in you giving out your number because other listeners may well.
So anyway, I'm going to give you
to receive that.
So my WhatsApp number is 075. Hold on a minute. Hold on.
I've got no time to.
Or you could tap it into your phone, innit? Live and direct.
Nice and live and direct, yeah.
You ready?
Let me save this thing. Yeah, go on. Give us the number.
Yeah, okay. 0758.
Okay.
222.
Okay.
8967.
Okay.
That's it. 0758 58 222 8967.
And your name is Princess Africa?
Oh, bless you. My name is Griot Chinyere. Griot.
Okay.
Chinyere. Do you want my... Chinyere. CHINYERE.
Okay.
Okay? So please do call me, WhatsApp me. Let's continue this conversation. I like it.
We shall do, because at the end of the day, we got work to do, you know.
Yes.
We didn't do the work. We must get the work out there, because I like what you just mentioned about the African village, really.
Thank you.
Right,
and I like what you're saying about the reggae artifacts and how we just need to take charge of our story and our narrative, our music, everything.
Elder Colin, is there a concluding comment that you'd like to make? Anything that you'd like to say to the listeners?
Well, I can say one thing to the listeners. I like the way the Garvey village has tried to see if they can do fundraising for the little money that they want.
Yeah.
And I love to see how the black community and the rest of the community get in touch and helping them out at the moment.
Okay.
That's positive.
Okay.
That's very, very positive, because as far as I know, the Garvey village will be something for our community to jump on and can express ourselves, do our marketing and etc. What we want to do much better.
Excellent. And it's interesting that it is sisters who are at the forefront of that project.
It is. To see our sisters are getting so strong, they make the men become ashamed of themselves.
No, that's not the vision. No.
You know, these men want to put their head under the arm and run and fly, because over the years we should have give the ladies and the sisters a chance to get on, but we tend to want to pull them down. Women can't do this, women can't do that. But now they put us to shame.
Well, this is all part of the correction process.
Well, I know when you say the correction process, we must be able to get correction process out there. Because if we don't, the Chinese going to spread what they've got into our community a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Elder Colin, I want to say a big thank you to you for ringing in, for participating, for reminding us about the reggae exhibition also. Thank you so much for your participation.
It's easy to remind you, www.reggaeexhibition.com.
Yes, okay, yes. Love and respect to you, Elder. Love and respect to you.
Pleasure.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
And I would like to say that I made a pledge for the Garvey village, because I think they were looking for people to pledge. And you don't have to pledge a lot, you just have to make a pledge. And the more people that pledge, the stronger their case is with the mayor to get to fundraise.
Right, okay.
So yeah, it's about pledging. Pledge
Right.
what, £2, £5, £10, however much you want, just to get it off the ground.
They get match funding.
Yeah.
On the basis of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we're coming, I think, towards the end of the program. Is there any message that you want to leave for the people, before we sign off this evening?
Message. Well, I'd like to encourage you all to come to the Inne Argor African Storytelling Village, 23rd to the 26th of July 2020, our 10th one, and possibly our last one. So please come along and join in and be part of it. It's powerful. I'd like to say that I would like us to speak into existence that which we wish. So let us imagine we are in their Argol and that our words are powerful and whatever we say will happen. So let's focus on what we want and ensuring that we speak positively about what we want, so that this cycle that we find ourselves in, we talk ourselves out of it. We have been here. We are amazing people. We love and we laugh. We give birth, and you know what? Whatever you say about other cultures, they still look to us for wisdom and guidance on how to be in the world, because our ancestors had it all written down, had it all said. So trust in yourself, trust in who you are, trust in your neighbor, and love and guidance is our protection and will keep us rising and shining. So I give thanks to my ancestors, I give thanks to my family, I give thanks to my brother Omowale for this opportunity to be here, and I give thanks to Pastor Bless, I give thanks to his beautiful sunshine, I give thanks for the dawning of this day. Ishe.
Sure.
Señorita. As soon as I come in off the street, you always wanna take the floor. You're always standing by the door. You're driving me crazy, that's for sure. Cool down, I will say, cool down, señorita, will say, cool down, I will say. I'm falling in love with you. This world was not one day, so why you rushing me, baby? I think that you just like having your own way. If that's the style, then change your mood, baby. Let's just cool it out, because we've got the time. Discover what's it all about. Are we fooling each other? Oh, tell me. Now there's no need to shout about it. You're my sugar, because I've got no doubts about it. You're my sugar.
That was Cool Down Arima by Keith Douglas. And it's just now remains for me to say, a good night to everybody. Thank you to Griot Chinyere for coming and just participating in the closing stages of the program. Also, I want to say a big thank you to our caller, Elder Colin. Thank you so much for ringing in and sharing your wisdom here on the program this evening. I want to say a big thank you to all of those who listened to the program this evening. A big thank you, of course, to all of my fellow presenters here on Blessed Radio. Thank you also to the engineers who have been behind the scenes working very hard. Thank you for all of the support that you've been giving us, especially in today's program. And of course, a big thank you goes out to the station's managers, the management team who are in the background doing what is necessary to ensure that we're able to interact here on Bless Radio. We will be continuing to look at the relationship between African people, or the position of African people within the capitalist system in next Monday's program. I want to say a big thank you to our ancestors, without whom none of us would be here today, and look forward to sharing a discussion with you. Same time next Monday, that's between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. It will be the Monday after now. It won't be next Monday. We'll be doing a special broadcast next Monday, but it will be Monday week. Love and respect to you all. Asheo.